On today's show, day one of the NBA draft is complete. And who are some names that could be available for the Cavs in day two later on Thursday night? Plus, there's a team, I think every team, including the Cavs, should be calling about potential trades. We'll talk about that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about the show. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get started here, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button to help spread the word about Locked On Cavs. Night one of the NBA draft is in the books. The Cavaliers, of course, did not have a pick. We're not expected to find a way to get a pick. And that is kind of just how the night went. So if you're a Cavs fan, you were certainly a casual observer of the first night. I will have some thoughts on that coming up a little bit later, but it is time for night two. Why the NBA has to separate this into two nights, I will not understand probably ever, but the Cavs do have two picks in the second round. They have the 49th overall pick, which they got via trade from the Milwaukee Bucks a few years back, and then they have the number 58, technically I think number 59, but because there was a pick forfeited in front of them, there are only actually 59 picks in this draft. That pick was forfeited by the New York Knicks for tampering with Jalen Brunson, and I think they think that was pretty worth it because, of course, I would give up a second-round pick to have Jalen Brunson on my team. So the Cavs will have two late second-round picks. So these names that we're going to talk about here as guys that could potentially be available for the Cavs might not all be there. This isn't as if they pick at 35 and so only three guys are going to be off the board. We can talk about a bunch, and we know they will mostly be there. And of course, this is a position where it's very much a crapshoot. And that's just what the second round is. That's what I think a lot of the first round is. I think that if you look at outside of the top 5 picks in the NBA draft, I kind of think it's all a coin flip. And I'm going to be very interested in the draft strategy for the Cavs because having 2 second-round picks doesn't necessarily fit their timeline right now. Of course, you're not drafting for current need. You're drafting for future need. And with picks number 58 and 49, that's something that there's no guarantee that's going to pan out. That's oftentimes, I think this type of pick hits roughly 1 out of every 6 or 7 times. So that's what the Cavs are up against. But their draft strategy, to me, will be an interesting thing. And one of the names that a lot of different outlets have mocked to the Cavs is Nyang. Nyang is a 6'7" wing, currently playing professionally in Italy. He is from the Senegal, and he is somebody that I think could make a lot of sense for the Cavs, particularly at that number 58 spot. There are a few different mock drafts. The Athletic, I believe ESPN's second round mock that they put out after the first round of the draft on Wednesday night. They have Nyang going to the Cavs here. And I think it makes a lot of sense because he's not a guy that would come over right away. And if the Cavs make 2 picks, which I don't know if they are going to make both of these picks, but if they make 2 picks on Thursday, it makes sense for at least one of them to not come over to the NBA right away. It makes sense for them to have a draft and stash prospect sort of the way they did with Luke Travers, and they've done with a few other guys. I think Chetty Osman was this way back in the day when he was a second-round selection by the Cavs, all the way back in the mid-2010s. So Nyang, it has the Athletics bio for him, Nyang is a 6'7" athletic wing, currently playing for Trento in the Italian League, and decided to stay in the draft as an early entrant. He has intriguing defensive tools and is a willing cutter off the ball. That sounds like it fits in Cleveland. While averaging just under 8 points and 5.2 rebounds, he does need to work on his jumper. He'll be a draft and stash guy who gets left overseas to see how his development goes over the next few years. I think that makes a ton of sense for the Cavs. I think the cutting aspect makes a ton of sense, but I do think you're looking a little bit less at who this prospect is right now. When you are talking about a draft and stash guy, you're looking a little bit less at who this person is right now. You're looking at, okay, well, what can you be in 2 or 3 years? In 2 or 3 years, can you be somebody that helps the Cavs? And I also think having a draft and stash guy makes sense because I don't think that the Cavs are going to want to give a second round pick, especially the number 58 overall pick, a full NBA contract. Now, they can use the second round exception. That is one of the few ways as a second apron team that they are allowed to sign guys. So they can do that. It's not as if they're not allowed to spend money here. This is one of the few areas they are. But I don't know that they want to do that. And I also think it's pretty unlikely. Well, maybe not pretty unlikely, but I don't know the chances that they're going to have multiple two-way spots available. I do think there will be at least one two-way spot for them available. I'm not so sure that both Emoni Bates and Luke Travers are going to be back in Cleveland. So I do think if you select a guy at 49, that guy probably is going to be on a two-way deal. If you select somebody at 58 like Nyang, probably not going to be in the NBA next year. And I think that's the right strategy for the Cavs to have, because if they do that, it doesn't handcuff them. They don't have two rookies on the roster when they're trying to compete for a championship, because that is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to manage and get the development when your roster is cut a little bit short. There are a lot of people, certainly, that if you were somebody that was complaining about Tristan Thompson taking up a roster spot, having 2 second-round rookies taking up a roster spot it does kind of hamstring you, because those players are not expected to be able to contribute right away. So let's move to number 49 now, because Nyang is at number 58 in a few different mock drafts that are out on Thursday morning. And I am recording this on Thursday morning rather than Wednesday night, just because I wanted to sort of let the draft digest a little bit, let it breathe, and really see who is available for the Cavs, or who is expected to be available for the Cavs, so we can have that conversation rather than just kind of guessing near the end of the first round. The Athletic at number 49 has the Cavs selecting Jameer Watkins, a 6'5" wing from Florida State. Watkins, a little bit of an older prospect. He is 23 years old. And their bio says few players looked apart physically in the second round more than Watkins. He's a 6'5" wing with a 6'11" wingspan and a powerful build to match. He's best on defense right now, covers ground at a high level, physical on-ball defender. Game still needs to work offensively, because he does need to shift into more of an off-ball role in the NBA, which I do think is a pretty common thing when you talk about guys that are second-round picks that are used to being the best player on the team for their entire life, but then they get to the NBA and they're the worst player on their team. So their offensive role has to change quite a bit. He does have potential to do that, because he started to make catch-and-shoot threes at a higher clip in each of the last 2 years. I think while Watkins is a little bit undersized at 6'5", the 6'11" wingspan is something that's really attractive. I think that height is a little bit overrated in the NBA. Not saying that you can be, tiny, but I think wingspan matters more. I just think that the way we talk about length matters more than the way we talk about height. So to have a 6'11" wingspan, I do think is an attractive quality if you're looking at somebody at 49. And at this point in the draft, I actually do like selecting older prospects. I think it makes sense to draft a younger draft and stash guy later in the draft. But I think if you need somebody to contribute out of the second round, that somebody is most likely not going to be a one and done guy. They're most likely going to be somebody that has spent some time in colleging, that is much closer to their ceiling, if you will, than somebody like an Emoni Bates, who the Cavs drafted in the second round a few years ago. Because when you are asking them to develop, it's going to take a few years. It's going to take longer for a second round pick to develop than you would imagine a first round pick to develop. Of course, they're not all hits, but it's going to take longer as far as that goes. But if Watkins is already 23 years old, theoretically, he's closer to his ceiling and should have a little bit of a higher floor. I think a lot of the NBA draft early on is about drafting for high ceiling. You only care about what the ceiling is, and part of that is because bad teams are picking. If the Cavs are in a spot where if Jameer Watkins has a high floor as a prospect, and maybe not the highest ceiling, I think that's a fair trade to make because the chances of him working out with a high floor, I think, are better and sort of the thing that you're looking for when you get to this point in the draft, because they don't necessarily have time, I think, for a 23-year-old player to come in and need a lot of seasoning and development. That's something that I just don't know makes a ton of sense for them organizationally. And then, of course, ESPN want to go through their mock draft for the Cavs too, because they put out a new second round mock draft, and they at number 49 for the Cavs, they had them selecting Vladislav Golden. He's a center, played in Michigan. He is a big center. He's above 7 feet, I believe. He is certainly somebody that has some width to his game. He is more of a traditional center. And this is something that I have no idea if he's going to work out in the NBA. I think that there are some legitimate questions about whether or not he can play defensively away from the basket. And that is a difficult thing, of course, for a big man to do. But if you can't do that in today's NBA, I think it's even more difficult than it's ever been. But this would be a Jared Allen replacement. And Jared Allen might be on the team this year. He might not. I don't know if he's going to get traded. We'll see in the next couple of weeks. But I would be surprised if 2 years from now, Jared Allen's on the team. Because if you look at what the Boston Celtics are doing, this proves the whole, the second apron does matter type of thing. They've traded away Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and what they have to show in return for those two guys is essentially Anthony Simons, George Niang, and a second-round pick. So they have sent out a lot of talent because they needed to cut costs. The Cavs are going to have to do that at some point. Jared Allen probably going to get traded at some point to get them out of the second apron. Darius Garland might get traded at some point to get them out of the second apron. They might have to let guys walk. Like, that is just how this is going to have to work for them at a certain point down the road. I'm not saying that right now because, again, you're not drafting in the second round for need. You're drafting in the second round for potential futures. But Golden is somebody that, could he replace Jared Allen as maybe a rim protector, somebody that is a good screen setter, rolls to the rim? I don't think he could do everything Jared Allen can do. I don't think he's as athletic as Jared Allen. I don't think he moves as well. But can he do some of this stuff? Sure. And it is worth noting here, the same way it was talking about Watkins, Golden is an older prospect. He was a fifth-year senior at Michigan, so he has kind of reached a little bit of a different point in his development than some of the younger guys. And then, of course, at number 58, ESPN also has the Cavs selecting Nyang. Everything I said earlier about him still holds up today. Now, there were some trades. One that I found particularly interesting that happened during the first round on Wednesday night. And there's a team that I don't know what a trade would look like. I don't know if they'd still have interest, but there's a team the Cavs need to be calling. I'll tell you who that is next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. It is time to be outside. It is beautiful out now. The sun is shining. It is really, really warm, maybe a little bit too warm if you're in Northeast Ohio the past few days, but there's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair's made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, ready for summer. Wayfair's got everything you need to make your space feel just like that. They've got conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, even the perfect string lighting to set your vibe for your outdoor space. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. So don't wait, because you need to make your outdoor space today. Make it that dream oasis that you've always been dreaming of with Wayfair. Enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That is wayfair.com, wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating and leave us a nice review as well. So there was a trade on Wednesday night during the first round that really, really caught my attention. And it was the trade between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Atlanta Hawks. And the Hawks essentially traded the number 13 pick which the Pelicans turned into Derek Queen out of Maryland. Fine young prospect. Have no idea if he's going to be good or not in the NBA because that's how these things go. But fine young prospect. They traded him or his rights to the Pelicans for the 23rd pick in this draft. Fine. They ended up selecting, I believe, Asa Newell out of Georgia. And they also sent back to Atlanta an unprotected first-round pick next year. Now, that first-round pick next year is the better of the first-round picks between New Orleans' own and the Milwaukee Bucks. They got that pick from Milwaukee as part of the Drew Holiday trade. I think that pick might be pretty good. I think that the New Orleans pick might be pretty good. Of course, Joe Dumars is now running the show in New Orleans after the Pelicans fired David Griffin a few months back. And he's now made 3 pretty sizable moves. One of them was trading picks with the Pacers, and this is more bad luck than anything. They sent the Pacers because the Pelicans had the Pacers pick next year. So they sent that first round pick back to the Pacers, which at the time did not look like it was going to be a very good pick. And then Tyrese Halliburton tears his Achilles like 24 to 48 hours later. So now that pick might actually be pretty valuable and looks like a terrible trade for the Pacers or for the Pelicans, excuse me. They made the trade in which they sent CJ McCollum to Washington in exchange for Jordan Poole and Sadiq Bey. And I believe the 40th overall pick too. Like that is a kind of just, I don't know what this does for anybody trade. Like maybe Jordan Poole will be better in New Orleans playing in a situation where they're at least trying to win. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Jordan Poole guy, but that trade was just like, I don't know who this is really for. I don't know what this really does. And then the trade last night. So I think that there are times in the NBA, and I think that we have not been, completely devoid of this lately, but I don't know that there's been a ton of this lately. There are times when there's just a franchise out there that seems to be poorly run. And right now it looks like the Pelicans are that franchise. If I'm the Cavs and I don't know what a deal looks like, I don't know what the Pelicans would still have interest in considering who they drafted on Wednesday night from Cleveland's roster. But if I am the Cavs, I'm calling the Pelicans about making stuff happen because they are a franchise that right now, it looks like just on the surface, it looks like you can pretty easily win a trade with. And maybe that's an unfair thing to say after Joe Dumars has been on the job for a month and a half, 2 months, whatever it's been since he's been hired. But the early returns on his moves are, man, if I'm a GM of the Cavs or any other team, if I am a general manager, the Pelicans are a team that I am calling. If I want to trade somebody, they are the first team that I'm calling when I'm looking to make a move because they are a franchise that right now it looks like, yeah, we can win a trade with them pretty easily. And I think winning and losing trades can be a pretty subjective thing, especially in the moment, because most trades, believe it or not, are pretty evenly balanced. There's not a lot of trades in today's NBA. This has not always been the case, certainly. There's not a lot of trades in today's NBA that are just overwhelming wins for one side versus the other. Typically, both sides are able to extract a certain thing that they're trying to do, and the Pelicans have been able to do that. It's just the thing that they're trying to do hasn't made sense. Like for that pick that's going to Atlanta to not be good, both the Pelicans and the Bucks need to make the playoffs next year. Now, the Western Conference is very difficult. Zion Williamson, if he misses 25 games next year, which I think is a very fair thing to expect, are the Pelicans going to be a playoff team? I have some pretty serious doubts about that. I don't see it. The Milwaukee Bucks, we already know Damian Lillard is not going to play for them next year. And we don't know where Giannis is going to be. Giannis might still get traded. Now, it hasn't sounded like that so far, but he might still get traded from Milwaukee. If that happens, the Atlanta Hawks might have the number 1 pick next year. If you were to go over to our good friends at FanDuel, and I don't believe that as of now, they have the odds for like to make or miss the playoffs. But for both the Pelicans and the Bucks to make the playoffs next year, you're getting plus money on that parlay. Like, I would not expect both those teams to make the playoffs. They essentially handed the Atlanta Hawks a lottery ticket for the number 1 overall pick next year in order to select Derek Queen. It's the way I look at it. That's bad business. So if you're the Cavs, if there's an opportunity to take advantage of some of that bad business going on in New Orleans, that's the team. If they want to trade somebody, if they're looking to make a move, the Pelicans are the team that if I'm the Cavs, I'd be calling, and I'd be calling pretty frequently. Now, there was a conversation about Oklahoma City this time, maybe not this time, but a little bit earlier last year, like 13 months ago. And we talked about it on the radio this week. I was filling in on 92.3 The Fan with Ken Carmen. I want to expand upon that a little bit. We're going to do that next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Skiims. Yes, we're talking about underwear because I love to talk about underwear because my underwear is more comfortable than your underwear because I'm wearing Skiims underwear for men. I was intrigued when I heard about it. You should be intrigued as you hear this, as I am talking about it, you should be intrigued too because the quality, top notch, the comfort, top notch, the materials, top notch. It is, and I'm not kidding you when I say this, it is the best underwear that I've ever worn. Typically, I've stuck to the same style throughout my life, but I've rotated through a lot of different brands. I have worn a lot of different underwear brands throughout my entire life, and then I tried Skiims, and now I don't want to wear other underwear brands. I just want to wear Skiims every day because it is the most comfortable. It keeps its shape. Everything that you want underwear to do, that's how Skiims reacts. It's awesome, and you need to try it. If you don't try it, you're not wearing the best underwear you could be wearing. And I don't know about you. That's not a life that I want to go through. I don't want to go through life not wearing the best underwear that I could be wearing. So shop Skiims Men's at skims.com. That is Skims.com. And let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, Skims Men's at skims.com. That is Skims.com. If you want to be wearing the most comfortable underwear you've ever worn, this is the place to go. I'm telling you, it changed my life. It'll change yours too. So go to Skims Men's at skims.com. So last year, the Oklahoma City Thunder won 58 games. They were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They had a very good year. I don't know if they were necessarily expected to get to the NBA Finals, but they were expected at the very least to get to the Western Conference Finals last year. And of course, they were a young team. They were a team that had not done it before. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just kind of was the only guy I thought that in that postseason looked like he was ready for the moment. And they failed. And a lot of the conversation around them was they're not ready. That somebody like a Chet Holmgren, not ready. Jalen Williams, not ready. A lot of that roster, not ready. And that should sound familiar because I think that's a lot of what the conversation's been around the Cavs for the way that their postseason ended. And I was on the morning show with Ken Carmen on 92.3 The Fan for a couple of days this week. And as you might imagine, we talked a lot about the Cavs because that is where my expertise lies here. But I keep thinking about this more and more. And there are a lot of people that think the Cavs are, they don't have necessarily players that are ready to go be championship winning players. And I think that's a fair thing to say right now. I do. But I also keep coming back to, well, you're not ready until you are. And are the Cavs ready right now? No, I think the evidence would tell you they're not because they had a terribly disappointing postseason because they lost in a round they had no business losing in. They won 64 games and came up brutally short in the playoffs. So all that stuff is fair game, and you can't disagree with any of it because right now, all they've done is show us that they're not ready to win a title. But because those guys are not ready right now, doesn't mean they're not going to be ready. Last year, 13 months ago, Oklahoma City, they were not ready to win a title. And now they just had a parade. That's how these things work. They will be in a situation where they have to prove that they're ready next year. That's what next year is going to be about. We're not going to know about it until April. So maybe they will be ready next April. Maybe they won't be ready next April. I don't know. But I do think that you have to look at it and say, well, was Jalen Williams last year ready to win a championship? I think the answer was no. Was Chet Holmgren ready last year to go win a championship? I think the answer was no. I think you could say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last year was ready to win a championship in the same way that I think you could say this year, Darius Garland. And I think the injury certainly clouds this a lot, but until you can see him prove it in the playoffs, you have to say, no, he's not ready to win a championship. I think Evan Mobley is probably a little bit closer than some of those guys on OKC were last year. I thought that he had a good postseason despite the injury and not looking like himself for most of that series against the Pacers. But I still think you probably lean no there. Donovan Mitchell is ready to go win a championship. The rest of those guys aren't right now. But that doesn't mean that 12 months from now, we're having the same conversation. And I don't know that the Cavs are going to win the championship next year. I'm high on them. I think they're going to be good. I think the Eastern Conference is not going to be good. But those guys have to go out and prove that they're ready to win a championship. Maybe they will. I don't know. There's no way of knowing this. But what I do know is you're not ready until you are. And maybe next year they will be ready. We don't know if they will be, but we also don't know that they won't be either. And I do think it's a little unfair to say, yeah, those guys are just never going to be ready to win a championship, because I don't think that's going to be true. I do think that for some guys, and I don't know that it's going to be for everybody, but I do think for some guys, it's going to be a situation this summer where there's a lot of growing up because of what happened in this postseason. Because while they have come up short in the playoffs before, I don't think this group has experienced, really anybody on this group has experienced failure quite like this one, other than maybe Donovan Mitchell. So when you look at that and say, okay, well, they weren't ready yet, but I think they might be ready after this. We'll have to wait and see. There's no way to know until next May. But Oklahoma City wasn't ready to win a title until they did. And the same thing might be true for the Cavs, because we're having the same conversation about the Cavs that the world had about OKC at this time last year. So thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. I will be back first thing tomorrow. We'll be back at the normal time right here talking about what the Cavs do in the second round of the draft. Of course, they have 2 picks coming in at number 49 and number 58. So we will be talking about that tomorrow right here at Locked On Cavs. And hit that thumbs up button as we get out of here on YouTube as well.